Are you abundant or scarce? And what is your strategy? Does it match up with what you really want to be?
The biggest wealth accelerator I've had to date is finding both community and mentorship from people who are in the position where I want to be.
Welcome to the Wealth Strategy Secrets of the Ultra Wealthy podcast, where we help entrepreneurs like you exponentially build wealth through passive income to live a life of freedom and prosperity. Are you tired of paying too much in taxes, gambling your future on the stock market, and want to learn about hidden strategies for making your money work for you? And now your host, Dave Wolcott, serial entrepreneur and author of the best-selling book, The Holistic Wealth Strategy.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode on Wealth Strategy Secrets. In today's episode, we are joined by Joey Mure and Russ Morgan to delve into the transformative power of passive income and the journey towards financial freedom. Joey, a seasoned serial entrepreneur, shares his insights gained from co-founding ventures like Wealth Without Wall Street and Wake Up in Birmingham. And Russ Morgan, founder at Wealth Without Wall Street, shares his trajectory from being an investment advisor to a driving force behind his passion for creating opportunities and empowering individuals. In this episode, we discuss strategies to develop diverse and sustainable income streams, the importance of passive income for financial freedom, Russ's evolution from an investment advisor to an innovative leader, and lastly, investment tactics, asset allocation, and cultivating a growth-oriented mindset. Joey, Russ, welcome to the show.
Hey, Dave. Thank you for having
So glad to be here, Dave.
Yeah, really psyched to have you guys on. I know the audience is going to get a lot of value out of this one, as well as some good entertainment as we go along. But, we've got some good shared philosophies, I think, very like-minded in terms of, our approach. And really, guys, I love the mission that you're on to help people achieve financial freedom, really break free from Wall Street and conventional thinking, right? And really try to shift our mindset, which isn't so easy, right? We talk about it a lot and everything. But people have different things they're working through. It could be limiting beliefs from your past, maybe how you were raised, certain things about your environment or where you're from and things like that. So I really applaud your mission. And, I think that's a good segue to start the conversation with folks who may not be familiar with you gentlemen. And, let's talk about your background, how you got into this whole world of, Wealth Without Wall Street.
Yeah, so I'll kick it off, Dave, if that's okay. I was in the mortgage business for 11 years. And during that time, kind of came to the realization that a larger income doesn't equal freedom. And I'm a pretty slow learner. So it took me, all of those 11 years. But it was one of those things where I had put that in my mind as, man, once I hit a certain income level in my active business, right, that was going to equal some sort of financial success. I wouldn't have even called it financial freedom at that time. But I looked up at that time, I was making well over $300,000 in my 20s. And I thought, man, this is better than I would have anticipated. But at the same time, I was losing the people who I love the most. My wife, I have 5 daughters. And I just remember distinctly some some stories here. One, being at the beach on vacation and telling my wife and kids, hey, you guys go on down to the beach. I'll be right behind you. I just have to make this one more call, this one more pre-approval, whatever the case may be. And 3 or 4 hours later, I'm walking down that boardwalk behind my condo, and there's my family walking up that same boardwalk on the alternate side, and just pissed, just so discouraged and disappointed that dad is physically with them on vacation, but not present with them emotionally, mentally, whatever you want to call it. And I just remember that being like a wake-up call, like, wait a minute, what am I doing? Right? I'm working so hard to create a lifestyle for these people who I can't even enjoy it with. And it was moments like that that made me realize, like, something I'm doing is not giving me the end result that I want. So my vision of what I wanted wasn't matching up with what I was doing. And so it really took those sort of kind of wake up calls, along with a book that Russ shared with me in 2009, that just made me say, there is a different way, and I need to be on that path, not constantly following the traditional thought of what you should do.
Totally resonates. I think so many people are just struggling with the grind because in reality, right, we were all raised to put in sweat equity, work really hard, right? These are the values that we, instantiated us when we were raised, right? So I think that's a really interesting reflection that you had at that point to make the shift. How about for you, Russ?
I listened to your story, and it's so funny that I feel like my story emulates a lot of yours, Dave, where you talked about, except I didn't have 3 kids at one time. I spread out the 4 kids over, a period of like 8.5 years. We decided to do it a more traditional approach. I love the way that you guys just shotgunned in there, man. But when I was listening to your story and you were talking about kind of going to the financial planner and saying, what now? And then realizing that the 6 to 7% a year approach was not going to fit what you wanted. Well, I was that financial planner that you were going to. No, not literally, but I was a certified financial planner. And I was telling people a lot of those same things that you were hearing. And the confused look that you left with was the one that I was familiar with. They'd leave my office and wonder, man, is this the best strategy? But it took the market crash in 2007, 2008 for me to realize it for myself. My wife had finished dental school in 2006. So the two of us were highly educated, highly paid, right? And the market, though, just took half the investments that we had been depending upon that same approach that I was telling people. So I was eating my own cooking. I just realized when it went down, I had no idea what was going to keep it from going down in the future. And all of the mentors, all of the people that I surrounded myself with at that point in time had no idea either. And that's when I realized that I had to take a more active approach. I had to go find a strategy, and I didn't feel like it was laying inside the walls of Wall Street, which was pretty scary because that's how I was professionally trained. I was professionally trained to teach people this approach, and I had seen it broken. And more importantly, I'd seen the lack of confidence on the faces and in the responses when I asked people inside of Wall Street what was going to prevent it from happening in the future. And it led me down a path that ultimately, thankfully, has us here talking with you today.
Well, thank God you saw the light, Russ, because a lot of financial planners haven't quite yet seen the light, but it's a lot rosier on this side, right?
It is. I mean, it's not easy, right? But it is. I didn't know it then. Now we talk about financial freedom. You mentioned that's the mission that we're on, to help people become financially free, to stop trading time for money. Very similar mission that you share. I just didn't know the formula was easy. The work to accomplish it is hard, but the formula is easy. It's just having more passive income than we have monthly expenses. And once I was shown that formula, then even with my public school education and Alabama upbringing, I still knew, singularly focused, I could accomplish that one goal. And once I started trying to do it for myself, then I started sharing it with other clients, and Joey was one of those clients, and he decided to come on board and help me do it much better. And we've continued to have clients come on board and start teaching other people, and we've just continued to get better along the way.
Yeah. No, that's really fantastic. And I think another key dimension people don't really talk about as much in making that paradigm shift, it's really all about control as well. So part of my frustration was, I mean, I remember in 2000, during the tech bubble, right? And, things were good. And then just, things dropped like a hot air balloon. and you had absolutely no control, and this just feeling of helplessness on what you had worked for years and years and years and decades to build, right? To build up your hard-earned equity, and then just to watch that rug being pulled out from underneath you. I mean, for me, it was super unnerving, and that's what really helped trigger me to say, I got to get a different strategy, and I have to take control.
Yeah. Well, it's for some of us, it's easy because we didn't, like you and I didn't, we had to unlearn a bunch of things that we were either taught professionally or from others. But for some people, like, they're just hearing it for the first time. And I'm so envious of those people, right, that are able to just gain it from the beginning. And Joey was one of those people who he just heard it and just like, okay, cool, and caught on so quick. And for me, though, when I was trying to figure out all these things I had to unlearn, had to unpack all of the ideas of where I was putting money and what the results should be, right? Like, I was thinking return on investment and instead of cash flow.
Yeah, for sure. So, what do you guys think in terms of an investment thesis or overall wealth strategy? I know you've put something in place which I think is just really cool and shows that you are eating your own dog food, which is basically, taking your own passive income, right? And you guys have kind of put that together. I don't know if it's in a particular entity or something, but you are looking at different opportunities to generate cash flow and try to, create financial freedom to help show other people. So maybe that is your investment thesis or wealth strategy. But can you break that down for the audience?
Yeah, I'll kind of jump in there, Dave, to say I think the thesis that I have is that there are 5 major components that someone needs to solve in their investment journey. And it all starts with, and we call these our 5 pillars and our right next thing process. So like one of the biggest issues that we find when people engage with us is they love the idea of passive income being greater than monthly expenses, because they can see what that would do for them is they could literally pull up their calendar and there would be nothing on it, right? Imagine that, like, your passive income exceeds your monthly expenses. That means something is, I know this isn't really how it happens anymore, but you would go out to your mailbox and you'd pull out checks that equal more than your monthly expenses, and you didn't do anything for those things to show up, right? It was just automatic. Now, if that was the case, you would look at your calendar and it would be 0 like requirements on your time. You now are the person putting in the boxes. Like I'm a calendar blocking guy. Like, so I get to put the boxes on my calendar. My employer doesn't put them on there anymore. I do, right? That's what people love, but they don't understand that there are really some components that they need organization to in order for those things to happen. And it all starts with vision, right? Our very first pillar is, if you don't have a vision of what your life would look like, who would you be? What would you be doing? And what would you have if you were financially free today? That's one of the first things we do with everybody that works with us is they go through that process of building out that vision, because to be honest with you, Dave, they've given up on that. Most of us, if we're honest, we've given up on what is possible, and we've only done what we have to do. We're putting up with what's been given to us, or what we at least perceive to be our only option is to keep doing what we're doing and expecting something different. But the reality is, if we can stop and dream for a minute and go ahead and put out in front of us that vision of what we're trying to accomplish, only then should we consider what to invest in and what our money is doing. And
can I want to jump in there, because this is the vision part of, I think, is talked about a lot, Dave, but not really ever fleshed out for many of us to actually follow, because I think we may even feel it as frou-frou. And if you're impatient like I am, you want to jump to the actual thing. You're like, shut up, Joey. Tell me the thing that you're doing. Dave asked you, what's the thesis? Like, how are you guys investing? I want to get into the deep and nuggets of that because there's so many gold nuggets in probably what you guys have done. I want to hear that. But I want to share this insight that all of the stuff that we talk about as things that we implemented. And we had a guy come in our office, I don't know, 6 or 7 years ago. We hired him to be like a fractional COO for us. And he asked this one question that's developed our thesis. And I think this is why we start with this, is that he said, how much money do you make? And we gave him the answers. He said, now tell me, what do you need to live off of? And we told him. And he was like, well, wait a second. You guys are making way more money than you need to live off of. And I was like, yeah. He said, so now let's develop everything else in light of the fact that where you spend no more time having to make money and you're building out things that are just giving you more and more of your time back. And so when we decided that the most important valuable resource that we had was our time, then that informed our investment thesis as well. So our investment thesis came out of the idea of we are going to invest where it doesn't require more time. And if we do put time into it, we have to have a trade-off and give up something else that is taking time from us. And so when we build out this vision, and so as we were talking about vision for anybody, we started with us to say that we had to really know what we wanted, because most people don't know what they want. And so without developing that, you don't know what investment strategy you should employ, because there's so many different strategies, right? There's very active and there's very passive, and you needed to figure out. So for us, we had to say, for us, we were going to not put any more time into our investing approach without giving up time somewhere else.
Yeah, that's spot on, Russ. I really boil it down to the 4 freedoms that are there, right? Because if you have more money, right, kind of like Joey was saying, what is that enabling you to be, do, or have, right, in your life? So do I have freedom of purpose? If my calendar is clear, am I getting up every day and spending my time on something that's fascinating and motivating to me and has a big purpose, right? If I have freedom of time, I have the time with which to plan my day or spend it with my family, as I choose. Also, freedom of relationship. You two chose to work with each other and help educate others versus, being in that institutional environment where you're working for someone else and they're not necessarily like-minded. So I think, really with investor psychology, it's really unpacking those freedoms of what you're really looking to try to get at. But let's take it the next level for the audience and let's talk about your investment thesis, right? Let's talk about some particular things. So my guess would be clearly you're looking to invest for cash flow, right? If you're trying to get to financial freedom, there's probably some tax efficiency components in there. There's probably some growth. But let's talk a little specifically around your thesis and what kind of assets you're targeting.
Yeah, so I'll mention a couple of things that we've learned the hard way. Is to that point, it is all about cash flow. And secondly, it is all about an operator, right? When Russ was telling you in just a minute ago that we had to be very clear that there could be no more time invested, but we had to use that cash flow that it was creating to buy back our time, that really changed everything. I'll give you a quick story that led to that. Years ago, I bought a drop shipping company thinking this is so easy, right? A drop shipping company. What could be easier? You don't even have to have your own inventory. You just connect buyers to people with inventory in China, and all of a sudden your life is just, you're great. Like it just all works out. And I did this actually with a good intention. I have, like I said, 5 daughters. So I bought the company 100unicorns.com, Dave. Like, could you imagine a better business to introduce your daughters to show them like how a business works? I mean, unicorns, like that's a girl's best friend. And so I'm like, man, this is amazing. I'm going to buy this brand and I'm going to show them how it works and it's going to be so easy. And then I realized this is one of the hardest businesses to make money in if you don't understand digital advertising, Google ads, Facebook ads, Pinterest. Like, by the way, I hate social media, Dave. Like, it is one of my least favorite things in the world. And all of a sudden, this brand, I buy this and I find out all these things are dependent on me being good at those things that I'm terrible at and actually having to operate a business. Well, if you can imagine, it has sucked wind. It has been the worst investment I've ever made. And by the way, I've never taught my daughters anything about business because I couldn't even figure it out enough for myself. Like, so I'm just telling you, I learned a lot from that. And it all of a sudden said, man, what is my investor DNA? Who am I as an investor? And it started to reveal, like, we need to be matched up personally with the things that we invest in. It's not just about return. It's not just about tax efficiency. It's not just about those components of an investment. It's about the investment itself matching up with our personality. And that kind of led us to develop this investor DNA profile that anybody can take, but it all of a sudden starts to really like filter down what the options are that I should focus my attention and my time on. And I know Russ had made some of the same mistakes that I did.
Well, the thing about that, Dave, is just ultimately we all have a bent toward some gifting, right? Some skill set, some experience that we've learned, and that's going to help us be more successful. You've heard the adage, you should do what you love. Well, you should do what you're good at, regardless if you love it. You should do what you're good at, right? Or even better, do what you're great at. And I think up until this point, Joey and I, before we really understood that well, had been investing in things that we saw other people having success in, and had followed the old adage that success leaves clues. They're having success there, I'm going to do that. And we weren't having the same success, and we were wondering why. So how we developed our own investment thesis was by saying, hey, what was making it successful for them, and why am I not having success in that? Oh, they have skill sets, they have experiences, they have resources and relationships that I don't possess. They have more reps in that specific area than I have. That's why they're having success. Okay, well, what do I have experience in? What do I have skills in? What do I have relationships in? How can I use those things in order to create success for me? And so Joey and I realized that even the two of us as business partners were not built exactly the same. We had a lot of the same network, right? We had some of the same experiences, but we had different skill sets. And we looked at our investment opportunities and started putting together things where we would use each other's skills to the highest level. One of those areas where we were looking at the short-term rental business, we're seeing people having a lot of success putting, condos, apartments, homes on Airbnb. And we thought, well, how could we use the things that we have skills in, which is influence, right? We have the ability to influence, have a podcast. We have, marketing arms of our business, and we could do that. Well, who's our network? Do we know anybody who would be a good operator to this business? And we had a guy who'd been running a business in the real estate world for 10 years, went through some hardship and was looking for a new opportunity. And we said, okay, well, what if we took this guy who had entrepreneurial experience and chops and wouldn't need a whole lot of leadership from the two of us because we're terrible managers. And then we matched him up with some of our network of people who have been building out 40, 50, 60 units themselves. And so we bought a program with him. So we used our resources. We used our network. We used the person that we had. And so we literally built a short-term rental business from zero, starting in the middle of 2020, right? Great time for travel. And we're in a non-travel market in Birmingham, Alabama, and built it to, I think at our high, we had about 28 units. And we were using our skill sets. We were using our resources. We were using our network. And we were, doing $20,000 to $30,000 a month net profit after all expenses paid. And Joey and I were using the best thing, which was our minds, because we were not using our time, because we had a full-time operator running it. And so for us, that was just one example of how we took this investor DNA concept, applied it to us, and then started saying, well, what are other areas that we could get involved in? And we follow that approach. So it doesn't matter if it's investing through short-term rental business, whether it's running a land flipping business, investing in other e-commerce brands, or doing private equity deals, whatever it is, we're using the giftings that we're already possessing and not trying to invent new ones just because someone else is having success in that area.
What if everything you thought you knew about investing was wrong? Would you like to create a wealth strategy like the top 1% have and get exclusive access to top private equity deals that provide downside protection, tax efficiency, predictable cash flow, and have a lucrative upside? Discover how with the Pantheon Advantage and join our investor club today at pantheoninvest.com.
Yeah, Dan Sullivan refers to it as having your unique ability. So it's really your instinctual wiring, plus what you had pointed out is what are you really not only good at, but what are you really great at, right? And once you can define that, I think it's such an important shift that you can make, right? Because, you know, it's kind of clear, right? If you like real estate is a people business, right? It's investing in people. It's all a people business, right? But if you want to be an options trader and click a mouse all day long, you know, maybe you're pretty analytical and technical and, you know, you like to do that, right? And I think there's paths for both, to your point, but really getting clear in your investor DNA. We also have an entire module in our mastermind group that we go through investor DNA as well. So I think that's really spot on, trying to identify that first, right, before you get into any tactics of specific investments or whatever as well. So yeah, that's really helpful. So why don't we talk a little bit more and really jump into, I think, another key strategy that I know is near and dear to your hearts and to help kind of educate listeners a little bit. But let's talk about infinite banking. Okay, let's unveil that. And how did you guys really come across it as a solution? There's a lot of confusion in the marketplace as to what it is. I think it takes a lot of people a long time to really wrap their heads around this concept on what it is. But it's been fascinating to me to see, you know, every family office or ultra high net worth, you know, individual that I know, this is a cornerstone, you know, to their strategy. So thoughts?
Yeah, I'll jump in first there. Since he keeps going first, I'll let him correct all the mistakes I make this time. Well, the concept of infinite banking, I think to talk about what it is, first let's talk about what it's not, right? It is not a product, as so many of us in the industry, the financial industry, have tried to make it out to be like this silver bullet of approach that you can apply anywhere. And Joey and I, we found out about this from a mentor of ours who wrote a book called Becoming Your Own Banker. And we live in Birmingham, Alabama, and we actually had a chance to spend a lot of time with this man named Nelson Nash. And he's since passed, but he was an economist. He lived into his mid 80s. He wrote this book that talked about our need for access to cash. And the biggest obstacle to becoming financially free was often shared to us, that most people don't have access to cash. And then they delegate the finance arm to third parties. And so what he shared in this book is how to use a financial product, which this is what most people talk about, how to use a dividend paying whole life insurance policy as the place to where they store cash. But one of the things that we learned over time is that it's the use of that cash. It's the understanding of the cost of that cash is really what is the biggest pain point for entrepreneurs, investors, and business owners. And we started building our own, what people would call their own infinite banking systems, or they're becoming their own banks, or whatever they want to call it. We started doing this in 2009 and 2010 personally. And between Joey and I, we've built our systems up to encompass our investing, our business, our personal, our legacy. All of these approaches have been put in there. But it wasn't until we realized that it needed to flow through some sort of operating system that made it easy for us that we really took advantage of it to its fullest capacity. And when Joey and I were just sitting there one day with one of our mentors, we were sharing this strategy with him, and he sold businesses for billions of dollars. He advised people for a number of years as a Goldman Sachs banker. And he was looking at a little scribble note, Dave, that Joey and I had written on a piece of paper. And he said, "What is that?" And we said, oh, this is just the way that we use our infinite banking system to run our life through it. He goes, so that's like your passive income operating system. I was like, well, that's a fancier name than I would have ever come up with, but yes. And he's like, well, walk me through it. Show me what's happening here. I said, well, what we do is we take all of our active dollars that we make and we push down through this process, any dollars that we spend personally, and the rest comes across this line over here, and we use it to save, to invest, and to pay taxes. And he's like, well, does that require a whole lot of moving parts? We're like, no, actually, we use this tool, and we have many different ways to set it up. And once we set it up the first time, it then starts running on autopilot. And it makes when I make a decision to invest, if it's going to create cash flow, I know where to put it. If I know I'm going to have a tax bill, I know where the money's going to come from. I know I need to, pay a new premium on the life insurance policy. The 30th one we've bought, I know where it's going to come from. And we've set all of those systems up in order to create a method that makes our life simple. And I think as entrepreneurs and investors and business owners, we don't need new jobs. We don't want things that are hard. And for me, it was when I figured out all of these little tools, I've realized that it's the thing that's made everything else we do better. How else would you say that, Joey, differently?
Can I just tag into that first, Russ? So you started your conversation out around being product oriented. And oftentimes you can speak to this really well coming out of a financial services institution. And a lot of those institutions actually provide some type of, cash value whole life insurance policy, right? But they may not necessarily be structured properly, nor are people utilizing the process that you articulated. So can you help people understand the differences there?
Yeah. Well, one of the things is that financial products are built by financial institutions. Financial advisors and planners work for those financial institutions directly or indirectly. And so the methods in which they're sold or the methods in which they're taught are based upon what the financial institutions made them for. So that was a big fancy way of saying when an insurance company makes an insurance product, a whole life policy, they have one method for it in mind: provide a death benefit, provide a profit for those who own it. That's it. And so they teach their insurance agents how to sell it based upon those methods. And that's how I was taught. I was taught a death benefit was a product that my clients would need to protect their families, and if they were of high net worth, to protect their estate. And I was taught how to sell it to them. Give them as much as they can get for as little as they want to pay for it, right? Like the Walmart approach. And that was the way I looked at all financial products. And that's why most financial gurus, the ones that get on the talk shows, talk about it in light of that strategy. But when I learned about the infinite banking concept using an actual tool like the insurance product, I learned about it from a guy that was an economist. And all he was looking at it was, he was trying to solve a problem of how do I have access to cash and how do I reduce my dependence on third-party banks. And he saw in all the financial products that he had been exposed to that this one product actually possessed a lot of the functionality that he wanted. The problem is he wasn't putting enough money in it, so he didn't have a big enough pool of money to solve his problem. And so he started this process of putting way more money into his life insurance contracts than the average person would do, like 5 or 10 or 20 fold. So Joey and we put large 6 figures every single year and have 7 figures of cash value in these life insurance policies, which is unfathomable for the average person. Not saying that we're better than them, but we think differently based upon his teachings. And so when we started applying this to our own lives, and then we started sharing it with other people, the natural reaction, as you were sharing, Dave, is like, well, wait a second, I've always heard about it this way. We always heard about it from someone who was taught from an insurance company how to sell that specific product. But we're just saying there's a lot, a hammer can be used to create and destroy, right? A gun can be used to defend or kill or whatever, right? it's not the tool's problem. It's in the hands of the user. And it wasn't until we were given an instruction manual from someone who had a lot more wisdom of ways to grow wealth and how to do interesting things that we were like, oh, now I see its potential. And so when we see an insurance policy, and from time to time, there's people that actually will say, hey, I don't want this whole life insurance policy anymore. Joey and I will raise our hand immediately and say, let's have a conversation about how we can buy it from you. And we've done that because we see its potential. We understand the value of it. And when you understand the value of how to use something, right, then the tool becomes that much more interesting. But the process is the most interesting of all.
Yeah. Education is key.
Yeah, Dave, I'll make it super practical for me, at least my experience with this whole process of infinite banking. It came when I was at that kind of pinnacle of my career. I was making all this money, but I wasn't actually seeing success. And I was in the process of thinking, okay, I need to start saving for my kids' college. They were young at the time. And I started looking at what are the financial products out there, like 529 plans. Well, I started thinking there's all these things that are wrong with a 529 plan. Like, what if my kids don't go to college? Which, by the way, my oldest two are now 17 and 15, and they both have said, I'm not going to college because they don't have any reason to. One's an artist and one is just not going to be suited. She wants to actually be an entrepreneur and start an online business. And so I started looking at 529s like, well, if they don't go to college, now I'm going to get potentially penalized. I'm having to invest in things I don't know or understand, and I could actually lose value in because it's in a market-based approach. Like there's all these things I didn't appreciate about it. And then enter this idea of infinite banking. And then once I read the book, I started seeing, wait a minute, I am constantly putting money into places that I don't understand, that I can't control, and that I can't even access if a great deal that I do understand comes across my desk. So imagine, you're in the mortgage business. I'm seeing hundreds and hundreds of clients each year, many of which are in real estate related type of careers, some of them investors. And they would, from time to time, bring me a deal. Hey, Joey, I don't know if you ever work with people, but man, I got this great opportunity and I just need, $100K, to flip this house or whatever the case was. And I would be like, immediately, I don't know if anybody else who's listening right now can relate, but they're just like, oh man, I was just like, that's a great deal for someone else. Meanwhile, I've got hundreds of thousands of dollars sitting in a 401k because I was told that was a benefit for me. I need to do that for tax purposes, for, deferring this thing, for gaining a match from my employer, like all these reasons it was good for me. And in the meantime, I couldn't take advantage of deals because I was constantly allowing someone else to manage that money for me. I was losing money from time to time. I didn't understand why. And whenever I've now coupled that with the fact that I really wanted freedom today, right? I wanted to be able to say no to that phone call at the beach. I want to be able to spend time like I am now with my 5 daughters, helping to homeschool them, investing in one of my daughter's golf careers, like to help her, take her all over the country for different golf tournaments. I want to be able to invest in businesses that don't require my time. I could never do that if I was constantly putting money away until I was in my 60s, right? That all those things I mentioned that I want to do today are no longer even an option for me in my 60s. So, man, seeing the idea of infinite banking was a place I could pool capital that was going to constantly grow, and I could leverage it into all these things that Russ and I have been able to build over $50,000 a month in free cash flow, passive income outside of our regular active incomes, all because we had access to a pool of capital and take advantage of deals that we align with as investors, our own investor DNA profiles. That is the power of infinite banking, is taking and putting all those things and aligning them together.
Yeah, 100% agree. That's a great articulation. And you talked a bit about the 401k and also my journey as well. I think, like many of us, right, we're taught by our employers, our family, our peers, just, max out your 401k, defer your taxes, right? And it's the best vehicle that's there. And frankly, I mean, let's face it, right? Over 90% of Americans have the majority of their wealth tied up in these vehicles. It's in the trillions right now. So what do you think is holding people back? Why are people investing in these vehicles?
I think it's the fact that they don't know any different, right? I mean, that person is not listening to this podcast. If they were listening to you and listening to your story, they would say, wait a second, there probably is a different approach. Or if they would have heard Joey's story, they would have said, oh, there's a different approach. I think the large percentage of us are busy. We're busy, right? You're listening to this podcast. You're probably in the 1%. You're in the 1%ers. You've decided that you're going to be actively involved in your financial outcomes. Everybody has the goal to be financially free, right? Everybody has that goal. The problem is we don't rise to the goals. We fall to our systems. And most of the operating systems people have are to wake up, go to work, do the job, get paid for it, try not to get fired, go pick up the kids from school, go watch them in their extracurricular activities, come home, have dinner, watch a show or two with our spouse, go to bed, and repeat the process. And on the weekends, enjoy it by, going out to the park, watching a football game, whatever our hobby is. We don't take time to do it. That's what I would say most people, right? Now, there's a few that have just not been showed why. And we get asked that question because Joey and I make the audacious claim that a 401k is the absolute worst investment, worst place you can put money for financial freedom. We do that on purpose for all those people who are lovers of them, just so they'll say, well, why? And it's very simple, right? If you know the formula, passive income greater than monthly expenses equals financial freedom. And so I will ask then, I know, Dave, that you're on the same camp as us, but I would say, Dave, if your 401k, it's either going to produce a passive income or it's going to reduce a monthly expense. Otherwise, it's not going to be getting you closer to financial freedom. So does your 401k produce a passive income for you? And you're going to say, no. I'm going to say, Dave, does your 401k contribution every single month reduce a monthly expense for you? And you're going to say, no. And actually, technically, it's increasing my expenses, right? Like I have less access to cash. And so the answer, the question is, then is it getting you closer to, or is it getting you further from what you want, which is financial freedom? And your answer is always going to be, well, then further from. And we do this exercise on live stages and podcasts all over and ask those questions. And we have these light bulb moments where people are like, whoa, I've never considered that. Because maybe they've heard someone talk about how your 401k defers taxes. They defer the tax calculation. Maybe they've heard people talk about the fact taxes are going to go up in the future and they're trying to buy in whether that's true or not. They're trying to determine whether or not the stock market's going to earn 6, 8, 12, 50, or 0 or negative 50, right? All of those things are distraction points because those are debatable. None of us know the outcomes of that. But when we can make it so simple to say, is it producing a passive income or is it reducing a monthly expense for you? And if not, then all it's doing is getting you further from what you want. Then what do you want to do now? And people start to take action. They start to see the clarity in those simple decisions. It's all about frameworks. With the right framework, most people, right, with an average IQ can make right decisions. They just aren't given the frameworks, and most of the frameworks aren't coming to them because they're just busy.
I would add, Dave, one word is the reason why people love 401ks or just do it. It's exposure. And it's either a lack of exposure or it's overexposure in two different ways. One, if people are listening to your show, Dave, and they know what you're investing in and how your investment thesis is, they start to see that, man, a 6 or 8% or whatever the lie is that Wall Street is trying to tell you, that on average your portfolio will grow by fill in the blank percentage, you obliterate those with the things that you invest in, and you create cash flow, and you have tax benefits. Like, if people were exposed and understood that those things existed, why would they continue to just give that money away and hope that they get some arbitrary percentage number with no other benefits? Right.
Well, so
That's
here's
a
a
problem.
potential. Yeah, good point. So here's a potential objection some people might say. So my employer is giving me a 3% match, which is free money. So how would you reply to that?
Dave, is it producing a passive income or reducing the monthly expense for you? So then, is it getting you closer to, or is it getting you further from financial freedom? We have to have a baseline. So if the base, like, we have to have a level of agreement. When I, or Joey, or you, or anybody defines what financial freedom is, right? So if we all agree financial freedom allows us to do whatever we want, right? Everybody's definition of it's different, but the way we get there is by having more passive income. We have monthly expenses. Do we have that agreement? If that's not our agreement, because that's where I'm going to base all my conversation off of. And if I get us to that point and we both agree on that, then the match doesn't matter, right? The match is a distraction. The return is a distraction. The tax deferral is a distraction. Is it producing a passive income, or is it reducing a monthly expense? And if it's not, if we both agree to that, then is it getting us closer to, is it getting us further from? And
simple way to break it down. Yeah, for sure.
That's how I do it.
Yeah, I think there's also really, from a philosophical perspective, the thing that I really struggled with and kind of, came full circle all the way around was this, theory that Wall Street is putting out, right, which is really accumulation theory. So we're going to save every year in our life. We're going to put money away. Like you said, it's not increasing my passive income. It's not reducing my expenses. I keep putting it away. I can't access it till 65. Then we're going to tell you how much you can take out each year. And oh, by the way, we're the ones who control the tax rates. So if you think taxes today are what they're going to be in the future, I mean, you're mistaken, right? And you get to this supposedly magical point at 65, which you can start doing those things with your family. You can start traveling because now you have financial freedom at age 65. But what happens, I think, fundamentally, that's just completely incorrect, is you start killing your golden goose. So, you've worked for 40 years, you've built all this up, and now every year, okay, 4%, which, they have the 4% rule, which is, it's even less than that nowadays, right? So how are you going to actually live on that? I mean, if you saved 4 million, okay, you got to 4 million at 65, your 4% of that is 160K. And that's on ordinary income tax rates. So it's probably more like 100K that you're living on. And then that gets reduced every year beyond that. And then you have to live with the fact of, okay, with technology and advancements and everything, what happens if you live to 105? Will you outlive your money? Right. Yeah. So that entire, philosophy of accumulation, I think, is just completely incorrect.
Well, and I want to illustrate your point even further with the question, are you abundant or scarce? Are you abundant or scarce? And what is your strategy? Does it match up with what you really want to be? The lady, I was at the beach one time with my family. This is all of my stories around the beach. I think I'm just going to move to the beach. I keep telling Russ this, but I was at the beach and I had my Wealth Without Wall Street shirts. In fact, all of our kids have Wealth Without Wall Street, like swim shirts. And so we're all walking around. It's like this, it's a
great banner ad for us.
Deluge.
Sounds like a cult. Yeah.
Deluge of a cult run around the beach. And this lady kind of comes over to us and just starts talking. She's like, what's this all about? And I'm like, oh, this is our company, Wealth Without Wall Street. She's like, well, I'll tell you what, we just retired last year, and man, all I can say is I hope it's enough. And we didn't go into all the depths of what that actually meant. Like I did ask her some follow-up questions, but the thought process is more in line with what you're saying, this accumulation mindset. What does it require for me to accumulate a lot? It requires me to live off of the least amount I can to save as much as I possibly can, right? I have this scarcity of I need to put as much away as possible, like, putting away my acorns for the winter kind of thing. And then when I get to the point where I'm at the top of this mountain I've accumulated, I'm literally then saying, how much blood do I want to let this year without dying, right? Am I going to I need to let out enough, but not too much. Like, are you all of a sudden after 40 something years going to start living this extravagant travel, like heavy lifestyle that you've put off for 40 something years? Do you realize those are absolute habits that you formed in the way you think. They don't go away just because you no longer check in and check out of your W-2 job. You have built a scarce mindset for that long. It doesn't become abundant just because you retire. And I don't choose that for myself. And not to mention the fact of your health at age 65 versus at age 35 or whatever date that you become financially free today. There's just no comparison. I'm watching my parents at age 63, just fall apart physically, and they have nothing. It would never live like they could have in their 30s.
Yeah. Russ, if you could give just one piece of advice to listeners about how they could accelerate their wealth trajectory, what would it be?
I would tell you that the biggest wealth accelerator I've had to date is finding both community and mentorship from people who are in the position where I want to be. And I think that you've heard it said that you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time around, and successful people spend time around successful people, and broke people spend time around broke people. And if you're not as successful as you want to be, I would find a community. I'd find mentors. And maybe they're just on podcasts like this, right? Joey and I found a lot of mentors that they don't know who we are and didn't know who we were until down the road. But those have been the greatest accelerators to me. I would say that would be what my advice would be to you.
Awesome. Joey?
I have to go back to what we've been talking about on this show already, is just getting clear on your vision to make sure that what you're investing in is supporting that vision. And it's not going against it. If you just take, it doesn't have to be very long. It could be an hour. It could be a couple of hours of your life that you do a really clear, introspection about what it is you want to accomplish. And then take an inventory of what you've been doing and seeing, just as simple as Russ. Russ is a simple guy from Alabama. Let's just be real. If he can point out in 30 seconds a 401k doesn't support your way to financial freedom by asking 2 simple questions, does it increase my passive income or decrease the liability or an expense? If you could do that with all the things you're doing, it is amazing the clarity that creates, and it will be the trajectory to get you there as fast as possible.
Yeah, sage advice. It's been an honor having you guys on the show. Really enjoyed the discussion. I know we could continue this quite a while, but sadly we do have to come to a close today. But if people would like to continue the journey with you, learn a little bit more about what you guys are doing at Wealth Without Wall Street, what is the best place to reach out?
You can go to wealthwithoutwallstreet.com/wealth strategy secrets. You might recognize that name. And we have all the access points to where you can connect with us. At the simplest level, we have a free community. We have over 7,500 people in where Joey and I interact. Joey said that we don't do social. So if you messages on social, we will get back to you usually in a week or two, because that's just not our area where we spend a lot of time. But in our community, you actually can DM us, and we do respond there. That's where we spend our time and effort, and encourage you to follow the things that we're doing through that wealthwithoutwallstreet.com/wealth strategy secrets.
Awesome. Gentlemen, thanks so much for coming on today. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mia, for having us.
Our pleasure.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Wealth Strategy Secrets. If you'd like to get a free copy of the book, go to holisticwealthstrategy.com. That's holisticwealthstrategy.com. If you'd like to learn more about upcoming opportunities at Pantheon, please visit pantheoninvest.com. That's pantheoninvest.com.